Uh, I'd gone through a very dark path of destruction. Um, I stole thousands of dollars from my dad and my stepmom. I was even involved in a setup with one of my very, very dear friends who actually just overdosed on New Year's. I started using drugs heavily, and I became an abusive partner, mostly emotionally, but there was one time when my boyfriend at the time became abusive with me, and I fought back. Um, I became homeless again. I turned him against his family, not knowing what I was doing at the time. But now I realize just the amount of damage that I actually did. One of the times when we lived down by the riverfront, I remember him laying his hands on me. We were both messed up on Klonopin, so I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember him putting his hands on me, and I told him if he came at me again, I was going to stab him. And so he came at me again, and I sliced his arm open. And the cops were called. He ended up telling the cops that he did it to himself, and we were both sent to the hospital. The next day, he was admitted into the psych ward, and I was released. When I was released, I had already burned all my bridges so badly that I slept in Forest Park for 8 days. And for those of you who don't know, Forest Park is a very dangerous place for someone who is 4'10" and a female. And, I'm so blessed because not one thing happened to me when I was in Forest Park. No one messed with me. God provided blankets for me, God provided food for me, even cigarettes, which isn't important, but it was just like, I was still taken care of even after all of the bad things that I have done. And that's another thing that I want to get across in my testimony. It's that no matter what you do, God will always love you. God will always love you, and no sin is worse than another. You are his child, and he will love you regardless of the things that you have done, as long as you accept him in your heart, because with God and with Jesus coming into your life, and really accepting them in your mind, body, and your spirit, you can't live the same that you once did. There's no way you can live the same that you once did, because your whole perception on everything, the whole world around you changes, and your experiences from your past, it all changes. And I used to get so depressed about my past, and I used to get so bent out of shape about my past, but now looking back, all of it was a blessing. Each and every part of it was a blessing. I was always protected by God's love and light the whole time that I was homeless, and my whole life I have been. Later, when my boyfriend at the time and I lived at his mother's house, we had been fighting, and he was still continuing to be abusive, and I was still continuing to push that abuse, and I attempted suicide again. But this time I had overdosed on tramadol, and I was very sick. I remember the overdose pretty well. I was throwing up, well, trying to throw up, but it was like dry heaving, and I just fell asleep. And I was rushed to the hospital once the cops showed up, and I was in the hospital for a couple days before going to the psych ward once again. But this time it was a little different because I honestly almost did die. And although I wasn't at the turning point of still being grateful for life and accepting God into my heart, it was still a big turning point for me when it came to attempting suicide. And it definitely was a big point in my life, reminding me that God still had plans for me. You know, it still was not my time to go. You know, and after we had got, you know, out of the hospital and everything, we still stayed together. And then later in our relationship, after being homeless for probably 5 or 6 months, we met a man at a gas station who had dropped his wallet, and we had returned it to him, and which is different for us because remember, we were robbing people, and which I'm not proud of, but there is no, you know, oh, it's fine because you were homeless. Like, it just wasn't okay. I didn't have God in my heart to know that I was always going to be provided for. But we had found this guy and we returned his wallet, and he had explained to us that there were thousands and thousands of dollars in his wallet, which we didn't even look at. And he had expressed to us if we needed anything to let us know. So at that point, we had asked him if there was any housing arrangements or anybody that he knew that, you know, had a really cheap apartment and didn't do like credit checks or anything like that. And this man ended up owning the apartment complex next door to the gas station that we were at. And so we ended up living there for a month. And, you know, I thank God so much for that man, and I thank God so much for that apartment, because really that was my true awakening. That was my first awakening to finding myself, my first awakening to finding God and finding light and peace within myself and on this earth. And I lost the apartment for continuing to date my boyfriend at the time. We weren't together for very long after that, though. And I know it was all in God's timing. And my ex-boyfriend now, I had nowhere to go, so he was going to take me into the homeless shelter. And after seeing the condition of the homeless shelter, he continued on to tell me that that was not a place that I was going to be staying. And so he paid for my hotel room for quite a long time. I stayed in the hotel for a really long time thanks to him, and it kept me off the streets, and it kept me, you know, healthier than I was. And eventually I had met another man on Facebook, and you know, this whole time God has just been keeping me safe, and I know I keep saying that, but the life I was living was so dangerous. And any of these times, like, I could have just been gone. You know, God could have just been like, girl, you know, obviously you don't deserve a life. But he had faith in me, and he still loved me through it all. And, you know, it could have been so much worse, but I was safe in every situation. Anyways, I had met this man on Facebook, and I moved in with him, and after a month of staying with him and his parents and switching between living with his mom and with his dad, we had decided to go to California on impulse. And he wanted to pick up some drugs, specifically meth. to drive straight to California. But we ended up getting pulled over, and the whole deal was a setup. And upon request, I took the drugs from him because it was very naive, and I put them in my pants. And when the cops pulled us over, they had found them on me. And so we went in for questioning, and we went in, to be interrogated, and I told the cops the truth, but at that point it didn't really matter. And so I ended up getting on probation, which I am still on probation for this instance. And honestly, it's been the biggest blessing of my life. It really has. Being on probation has been nothing but amazing. And I bet you no one in their right mind would ever say that. Anybody else on probation would be like, whatever. But probation has been so good for me. It has kept me so clean and so, head in the right space. And it's just opened up so many doors for me. And I'm stable now. And it's been so beautiful, you guys. I eventually moved out. I moved in with this woman who told me she was clean. She ended up not being clean and shooting up heroin in front of me. But that same night, I had met my last boyfriend, who I ended up dating for about 2 years. We became best friends, and this is where I met God in my life. His mother helped me with my financial stuff for my case and for my lawyer. I paid her back and then some for it all. She really showed me light, and she showed me, positive affirmations and changing my brain, basically the way my brain reacted to situations and how to deal with my emotions, not necessarily control them, but how to deal with them properly, how to communicate with people properly. I thank God every day for her, and I pray for her all the time, even though she doesn't like me now and she might, bash me all the time. I'm still so forever grateful for her. She showed me how to meditate and my yoga practice, and introduced me to God through Kabbalism, and a bunch of books that I have read, and I know it was God's doing. I know I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today without the knowledge that she gave me, but ultimately that God had given her to give me. During all this time, I was also struggling from bulimia, which I struggled with bulimia for 7 years. I had become more aware of God's presence at this time and the energy surrounding me. And one night, when I was purging or making myself throw up, I legitimately heard a voice tell me to stop. All of a sudden, I had this overwhelming chills throughout my body, and this fear of death fill my body. I just thought that the next time that I was going to regurgitate, I had this thought that my stomach was going to rupture, or I was going to rip my esophageal lining, which I do have stomach problems and erosion from, and a gastroesophageal reflux disorder from, the 7 years of being bulimic. But from that day forward, after God told me, stop what you're doing or you will die. And I stopped, I relapsed a couple times since then, but nothing too severe. It was maybe one time where I had a bad day and I was feeling super low about myself, but besides that, it's been completely clean, and I am completely happy with myself now. When you have God, honestly, there's there's nothing not to love about yourself. You know, if God loves you, who the heck cares who else loves you? You know, when you have God, there's nothing that can stand in your way. There's no mountain He can't move, you guys. Like, God is so good. He is so, so, so good. It's all thanks to God for putting these people in my life when I needed them, and just when the time is right. Me and my mom always say, God's will, God's way, God's time. And man, my whole life has been God's will, God's way, God's time. I had to learn all these lessons to be the person that I am today, and I wouldn't turn around and change it for anything. And you know, I know everything I've mentioned isn't all lollipops and rainbows that you used to sing God's miracles being. However, I truly believe that every single one of them were. There's a saying you probably know, and it goes, everything and everyone in your life is either a lesson or a blessing. And I always add on, even our lessons are blessings, because they're all God's plans, you guys. They show you light, they give you strength, and they lead you closer to God. And for that, I am forever grateful. Back to the storytelling. When my current boyfriend and I were about to be homeless again, this is the new one with the awesome mom who taught me a lot. I moved in with my friend Victoria. Her and her boyfriend had just broken up, so the timing was really ideal, obviously, because it's God's timing. However, shortly after moving in with her, her ex-boyfriend did a drug deal at her home and got it held up at gunpoint. It was one of the most aggravating and stomach-turning moments of my life, considering that we could have all died. God was with us the whole entire time. Not a hair was hurt on any of our heads. Victoria ended up moving back to her home state, leaving me homeless once again, or so I thought. I truly believe God had seen a shift in myself, because the next chapter of my life was so beautiful. You guys, like, complete 360 turnaround. Like, I really feel like God saw the shift within me and knew that I was ready to actually work on the relationship with Him. And my friend Jameson subleased his old apartment to me. In this apartment, I grew into someone who loved herself. I grew a relationship with God. As you know, God sent me so many books and people and songs into my life at the most perfect times when I needed them the most. And most importantly, it grew the relationship that I have with Him today. When my new boyfriend and I broke up, God actually had spoken so loudly to me, and through me, because normally breakups are so hard for me, and they used to be. You know, but He just told me we were supposed to go different ways and that He had different paths for us both. When I brought it up to Him, He agreed, and everything just went the way God had planned. And you know, the breakup wasn't painful like I expected or I was used to. I had a whole new feeling, and it was so sweet. I was excited for life, guys. Like, I went from someone who wanted to take her life every day to being someone who's excited for life and what God had planned for me. You know, I had a new truth, and I knew God was always with me. I knew God always loved me and wanted nothing, you know, absolutely nothing but to see me happy and living with Him in my heart, mind, my body, my soul. And soon after the breakup, my mom had contacted me and told me that she was moving and the house in Clarksburg needed to be rented out and offered it to me.